It is time to continue. It might amuse some of you to know that this world is named, when I selected from the names, the list of names, this world is called Let's Try That Again. In a way that directly refers to how it's my follow-up to my screwed up world where things didn't work out. I have a lot of torches. Let's just keep mining for a bit. Oh god. Because I could use more metal. Alright, first question is from, let's see, Adrian VanRassel. It's a little context is lost, but he says, to concur with your previous statements, I watch Let's Players with personalities. Though I have a few criticisms on how you view the falls of Let's Players, it isn't just no commentary, lack of content, or without face cams, it's lack of knowledge and persistent understanding of what Let's Plays, is the lack of knowledge and persistent understanding of when a LP'er plays. Some play like they completely forgot what has happened previously in recent episodes and misunderstand the progression of the story, so thankfully you embrace it and talk about it. There's more to the comment too, but we'll get to that in a moment. I think you might have misinterpreted what the topic was of one of my previous videos. As far as I can remember, I don't think I've made a video so far in this series where the purpose was to talk about what makes a Let's Play good or bad. I was just talking about what specifically makes a Let's Play channel successful, and discussing why silent channels tend to fail for specific reasons. I'm gonna follow... This is a time-consuming process, but I'm totally gonna be doing a downward staircase for a bit, just because it feels kind of natural. Sometimes it's handy just to make my own cave so I can find resources along the way. But yeah, the topic of that video wasn't really for the purpose of being like, this is what makes a channel good or not. It's just kind of what makes a channel successful, is having some kind of personality going on. Because it's actually totally unnecessary for a channel to do well. I mean, for a channel to do well, it's totally unnecessary for it to have like respect for the story or pay attention to what's going on all the time, because there are channels like Game Grumps or Funhouse or even PewDiePie where oftentimes they just kind of do whatever they feel like, whereas someone like Jesse Cox would be someone more like the person that actually is paying attention to the story and maybe even getting mad about whether or not it's executed well, whereas a lot of Let's Players just play the game and mostly are baiting for funny things to happen. So to them, it doesn't really matter if the whole thing makes sense or not. A lot of channels that are the most successful ones actually make one video and stop forever. And so like there's no continuity to it to begin with. But yeah, I never really made a video about paying attention or whatever. But at the same time, actually, I used to be on one of those channels. I used to be on a channel where a friend of mine and I was with Andrew on Sad Games, where we would just screw around the whole time. Because there's actually a lot of people who prefer channels that are just about having fun instead of sitting around and just paying attention to everything. In fact, I've actually had people complain that I don't talk over cutscenes, which is amazing, because if there's anything that I've learned consistently about Let's Playing is that people will consistently complain about whatever it is that you're not doing. And there are always mutually exclusive point of views where people have completely opposite ideas of how things should work. So yeah, if I'm doing a video where I'm talking over the cutscenes and making jokes and screwing around with my friends and taking the whole thing not so seriously, which is totally valid because video games are kind of supposed to be fun at some point, people complain that I'm talking over cutscenes. And when I make videos where I'm quiet during cutscenes and I edit the audio so that you can hear the cutscene properly, and I put a bunch of work into it, and then I talk about the cutscenes afterwards and stuff like that, the exact opposite happens, where people are waiting. They want me to be talking over the cutscene and making jokes and stuff like that. So yeah, as someone who has had years of experience on both sides, people always want both. It's just a thing that happens. It's definitely a bummer when someone is not paying attention and then complains about something that they should know if they were paying attention, but because they were screwing off, they didn't know about it, and now they're mad about the thing that they don't know. That's where it's often good to have an editor. Like one of the most infamous early episodes of Game Grumps, for example, was one where they played They played a game called Bad Teddy or Angry Bear, whatever. I have no fucking clue. It's a game that no one cares about and has been forgotten by time since then, because it's, aside from anything that went on in the video, is just, as far as I understand, it's just a bad game anyway, so who cares? But when they were playing it, they spent the entire first episode literally getting nothing done and just walking in circles, not understanding how to interact with stuff because they were just not paying attention, and they just weren't going to make any progress. It's like, sometimes stuff goes wrong when you're playing a game, but the funny thing is, you could just start over that episode, or you could skip ahead in editing. So I'm really baffled by channels that don't edit at all. But sometimes that's how some channels beat me at my own game, because there's some channels that make even more videos per day than I do, and lo and behold, it's because a lot of those people are actually Twitch streamers, and they just export their Twitch streams directly to YouTube in huge quantities, and those videos do extremely well because they can get a bunch of content out for a relevant game super fast. And I'm going on a tangent now at this point, but there's a lot of topics, let's say. Anyway, the later part of the question, which is more of why I picked it in the first place, was what didn't you like about The Witness? How could it have been better? During the Talos Principle, you voiced your opinion why you didn't like those, but for The Witness, you barely had any criticism. I had much less criticism for. Witness. First of all, Talos Principles was fantastic. So right now, I'm trying to think of what my criticisms of that game were, because it didn't have that much to criticize. I'm trying to think of what that would have been about, but I guess for Talos Principle, I guess I wasn't a big fan. Oh yeah, I didn't like the sigil puzzles. I remember I didn't like the sigil puzzles because having the Tetris puzzles be a weirdly large amount of the game when the other puzzles were so interesting was a bummer. What else did I not like about the game? I remember that this is more as a refresher, because for people listening, because I know that's not what the question's about. But I also didn't like that some traps would kill you, mainly because killing you meant restarting the entire puzzle, and sometimes a puzzle would involve an obnoxious amount of setup from time to time. So starting the entire thing over from scratch was actually like a major pain in the ass. And what was the stars. I didn't like the fact that the stars were often so obnoxiously hidden that you would literally not know how to even start looking for them. Like it was a godsend that the game took the time to make sure that the stars would be. It was fantastic that the game had little signs that would say how many stars exist in the entire world in specific locations, so you knew where to look for them at least, like what world to check. But some of the stars being like weird, absurd secrets where like you have to at the time that I was playing, you had to shine a laser into a tree, and you could connect the laser to the tree, but like how would you know to connect it to the tree, because you can't see a rod sticking out of it to receive the laser, and it's like you literally just had to be highlighting random things, and that felt really dumb, to the point where I've heard that they actually patched it where now you can actually visibly see a rod sticking out now, so it actually stands out as a thing, like that must be a puzzle, as opposed to how it was when I played it, which could be wrong. By the way, that's a reoccurring thing with me, is I'll have a complaint about a game, and then people will give me shit for complaining about something because it's not even true. But it's like, no, it's not true now, because you're playing it a year later, and in your version of the game, it's been patched. But in my version of the game, back when it was actually new, that was a thing. Everything was weird. Anyway, yeah, I didn't like the obscure stars. I didn't like the death traps, or particularly the fact that when you died from a trap, it would restart the entire thing instead of say like rewinding 10 seconds or something. And I wasn't a big fan of the sigil puzzles just in general. I wish I like the stars. I just wish that the stars were more commonly the type of star where there was like I liked it when the star was there. When they had a how do you say it? When they had like a panel, when they had a barrier, and it's like, to get this barrier open, you need to light this laser. And then it's like, well, how do I get that laser over here? Was the puzzle. Like, it was fun when they were a puzzle where I had to reverse engineer a solution. It was annoying when the star seemed to be an obscure secret you would only know by just bashing your head against the game forever. But overall, Talos Principle was very likely my game of the year when I played it, so I have very little to actually complain about with it. And The Witness is very similarly fantastic, where it's nearly flawless in many ways, to the point where I just absolutely love it. So now let's do the task of trying to complain about The Witness. One of the first things that comes to mind is I've been watching people play The Witness ever since I finished up, basically. And I've watched previously recorded play The Witness for a little while, which they kind of hated it. And I've heard other people talk about The Witness, and it's been discussed in every single freaking podcast that I listen to. So I've gotten a lot of perspectives on it. And I would say that based on what the feedback I've seen and heard so far, it seems like the game could very much benefit from not exactly more hand holding, but just a hint of direction, or maybe even it might even help if the island was organized in a way where you find more interesting things faster. Hey, look, emeralds. Because I think the game kind of made a mistake. I think Symmetry Island, or Symmetry Studio, or whatever you want to call it, I think that's alright for the most part. But I think that the desert area is actually potentially a little too uninteresting. And I think that I think there's probably zones of that game that would have been more interesting things to find earlier in the game. And yes, the island is open, but going by the general direction that the place is shaped, and the sort of forward trajectory that you have when you play the game at first, when you first leave the starting little keep, you're very likely to walk directly into first Symmetry Studio, and also maybe the town, and maybe the cherry blossom area, and then maybe the desert. I think you're less likely to go the other way because you're more likely to continue the forward trajectory you already had at first. And there's a few issues with that. One of which is just, and these are kind of hazards of just making a game that has no words in it, no tutorials, so you have to worry about people not understanding what's going on. And it's not always their fault necessarily, but when people run into the town on a regular basis, and then they're like, this game's impossible, this game doesn't tell you anything, this game's not fair. And it kind of feels that way when you first encounter there if it doesn't immediately click for you what the game is going to be at that point. And it's not entirely unfair to criticize that, and I kind of get that. I can think of all the games I've played for half an hour and then stopped, where for all I know that game could have clicked for me, and that some specific experience could have made me have the proper experience with that. Demon Souls is now one of my favorite games of all time, but it didn't do that until 2013, even though I had the game ever since its launch in 2009. I bought the game in 2009 and I played it for a little while. I beat the first two bosses. I was really intimidated by like many people, I was super intimidated by the big tower knight, and then when I took him out, it was yay, big victory. And then the game was going to keep going, and I was kind of exhausted by the idea of continuing it, and I didn't really want to keep going because it seemed like kind of a bummer, and I actually just kind of stopped. I never played past the tower knight. You just hit a weird dead end where the game's you have to go defeat an archdemon somewhere, and I'm I don't know where archdemons are, and this game's kind of been wearing me down, and I kind of just never played again. And there's a lot of games where that can kind of happen. So I can imagine a player beating the intro of The Witness, and then maybe beating the Symmetry area or some chunk of it, and then encountering the town and just feeling the sense of fatigue, and then going on to do something. I guess while I'm smelting that stuff, I can go chop down a tree while the sun's up. And just imagine someone just being fatigued by the sight of that town and its infinite complexity is just being shoved in your face all at once. And I get the point of the town, obviously. I get the point of pretty much everything in that game, because I've already finished it. And the town is your test of every mechanic in the game, and it's a guide of all the things. If you see something in the town you don't understand, it means that you need to find something you haven't seen yet. So it's a guide to how much stuff is on the island, much like the way that the lake is, but in a way that's more obvious, because the lake was confusing and completely easy. It was completely possible to miss in its entirety, but the town was an obvious form of that key to the game. And it's also a very satisfying conclusion. And that's the thing about it, though, is because it's a satisfying conclusion, it kind of feels like the island might have benefited from a different layout where the town was a later discovery instead of an earlier one. Because it's an early discovery, it mostly seems to, despite its best intentions, it seems to have the end result of mostly just intimidating and confusing and scaring players that are brand new to the game. Because I've seen a lot of people hit that location and just be like, fuck this. And then what else? What's the other thing they're likely to encounter besides the town? There's the cherry blossom trees, which honestly kind of might be one of the, like, it's the cherry blossom trees are so simple that they aren't particularly interesting in their solution. I kind of just breezed through that area, and the one interesting twist was that I was able to find that one little broken off branch that was hidden away in the studio to figure out exactly which little piece of the apple was on. But based on the comments I've seen and watching people play that area, people mostly just guessed that one little puzzle instead, because it's such a simple solution that it's easier to guess the right answer in a few seconds than to actually find the exact reason why that answer works. And even when you're solving it correctly, it's not the most fascinating puzzle to begin with. And that leaves you with what else in the area? You get hit by the quarry, which you can't access, which I actually am kind of okay with, because when they give you the inaccessible quarry, it kind of introduces the idea of like, ooh, there's puzzles somewhere it introduces the idea of like, I can only get through this door by solving this puzzle, but the puzzle looks completely obtuse to me. That must mean that there's other areas where I learned this is a puzzle, because I just walked past the thing that was a long tutorial for the black and white squares. Like, they introduce a tutorial early on, then they introduce a Castlevania-style locked door thing later on, and like, okay, those two mix together to make sense. Like, I like the use of the quarry early on, but since you can't go to the quarry, you kind of end up walking into the desert in most cases, at least from what I've seen so far of players. And the desert also, like the desert plus the cherry blossom area, being the two most likely areas to play early on, after like symmetry and encountering the town and giving up and stuff, are both not super interesting. Especially since I think the desert puzzles specifically are framed in a way where you're much less likely to solve them in the first place. And that's kind of a bummer. Because how do I put this? Like, the desert is so easy to miss the solutions for. Because, for those that don't know, and if you don't know, you shouldn't be listening to this video still. You should be watching my Let's Play of The Witness or playing the game yourself, because you're best off experiencing this yourself, because I'm about to actually talk about a puzzle mechanic if you haven't picked up on that yet. So this is your last chance to hop out before spoilers. In the desert, the solution involves finding reflections. You need to specifically get the light to reflect off the panels in order to see the smear. And at that point, what's kind of a bummer about the desert is that, first of all, once you find out the solution, it's literally like, oh, I look at it from over here and it just tells me the solution. So you're kind of not solving anything. It's more like using a decoder ring to tell you what's in the back of the book in the math book. Like, the answer exists in plain sight, and you just need to kind of decode it by looking at the right direction, which is something that happens right next door in the forest. But in the Shaded Woods forest area, it's more interesting because in that one they're transposing the solution in various different orientations and configurations, and they're distorting it in various ways, so you kind of still have to solve it and use your spatial reasoning to figure things out. But in the desert, it's kind of boring. Because in the desert, all you really do is, like your primary job in the desert is that you, I'm sorry, I should probably make a door, frankly. I'm actually all out of iron, so I should make a pickaxe. Let me get this done real quick and I'll get right back to that. I forgot to get sticks. Boom. I don't really have much more for that, so we'll just put this all away. There we go, back to that. So in the desert, it's kind of boring by comparison because you just walk around until a reflection shows you the solution to a puzzle, which is not exactly engaging content. I totally had more rocks here anyway. That's fine. I mean, wood. It's not. It's both. It's a perfect storm of a not entirely interesting solution but also an obtuse solution. So I think one of the end results is a lot of people, when they're a lot of people will either, not even will, have. I've seen people do the desert area, and a lot of them never figure out the solution because they're walking around and, like, they haven't really had reason to think that, looking at specific directions of a thing will give them a solution. And because it's a huge open desert area, you could walk in virtually any direction, and if you don't walk in the very, very specific direction that gives you a solution, then you're unlikely to actually solve it. And I mean, like, that, like, if I remember correctly, that part of the video for my series even was like it was super edited, if I remember correctly, and I jumped ahead by a fair chunk of time because I had no idea what was going on when I got to the desert at first. It took me a long time to figure out that little smears on the reflections were the solution. I think that was the case, and a lot of people just never figure it out, or they give up and look it up, and then when they look it up, they're like, oh, because like, and if you look up the solution and your response is oh instead of oh, then the puzzle probably wasn't very great, and I feel that way about the desert specifically. So I feel like it should have been. I don't know that you could have. I would say keep the desert. I think the problem with the desert was that they probably shouldn't have had the above ground portion of it, really. Because once you're wait, don't I have can't I do an offhand torch? Oh, boring. Oh, but you can right click to do that. So it's left click and right click, right? Yeah. Sorry, getting used to new mechanics that didn't exist before. I think that the problem with the desert is that you're kind of meant to stumble into the solution because you haven't been introduced to the idea. I mean, you have no idea that there even are smears on the thing, so why would you even try to get the reflection? Once you stumble into it, you're set. But before you stumble into it, why would you even look for it, is the issue. And so to help encourage people to stumble into the solution, it would have been probably better to encounter the desert puzzle for the first time in a more confined context. And so that probably would have been best done, for example, in that subterranean area where the rest of the more difficult puzzles of the desert area take place. Did I actually run out of torches? Oh, I know, they're in my offhand. Oh, shit. I'm just going to not use this right now. I'm going to get confused by that mechanic. I don't really want to accidentally place blocks over and over again. There's some control nuances I need to figure out. I think that they would have been best off axing the entire top part of the desert area, or coming up with some reason why, like maybe the top part would have somehow been used later in the process. Like maybe go inside first, then go outside afterwards or something. Because I think that the outside part of the desert temple is based on the playtesting that I've effectively seen by watching other people play the game. I think it's too unconstrained. There's so many different positions you could stand in without ever seeing the angle that they want you to see that actually gives you the solution. And I think that's a problem, because it leads to a lot of people having a really bad early experience with the game because they don't have fun with the desert. And it seems to be one of the more poorly done areas in general. But meanwhile, respect people's intelligence, since that's what the game's all about anyway. Maybe just throw them into the harder part right away. Because in the subterranean area, there's a whole lot less space. Like, not subterranean, well, kind of subterranean, but the best way to call it would be the inside of the temple. In the inside of the temple, everything's dark. And it's also a much smaller area to stand in. And in that much smaller, darker environment, there's way fewer locations to stand in, which means that you're more likely to actually stand in the position that will give you the solution. And so suddenly your player, which in this game doesn't ever want to have tutorials and so on, the player is suddenly way more likely to stumble on the solution, which seems like a better thing. So give them that room with the little torch, that room that has the control panel and the light in the corner, where the light's turned on and like the corner of the panel's lit up by it, and you can just barely see a reflection, and you're like, oh, look, gold. I found gold. Like when you just barely see the reflection of the stuff in there, and you're like, "Oh, look what's going on over there." Like that little hint is what they need. The starting area, I see so many people walk around in that area, and I saw myself walking around in that area, and the likelihood that you're going to stand in the exact position where that will light up... Did I even get the gold? I don't think I did. That lava's a problem. Damn it. Oh well. Well, I can smelt at least. The likelihood that you're going to stand in the exact position that lights up the shadow correctly so you can move forward seems just astronomical. And so a lot of people just don't solve it the way that the developer likely wants them to. But yeah, that subterranean area is perfect, because you walk in, you see a panel on the floor, you see light across the panel, and you're immediately curious, like, that light is across that panel in a weird fashion. I'm kind of curious about that. Then you like flip a switch on that one terminal and the lights change, and you're like, oh, does lighting up specific things affect something? And maybe you think it's in part of the room, and maybe you think it's actually the panel itself, but you're at least sort of on the right track immediately. And that would have been a better way to handle that area, because I think a lot of people that don't end up beating the game, that I've seen, like the YouTubers I've seen and so on, or Twitch streamers, they have a tendency to hit the part where they just barely get to the part with the desert area, and they just usually give up and get bored. And on some level, I almost don't blame them, because I was going forward partly based on my faith in Jonathan Blow, of like, oh, surely this is going to be clever, I'm sure, so let's just keep going and see how it plays out. And just the idea of like, well, I've already committed to doing a YouTube series of this, so I'm going to stick it out. We're like two things to help motivate me, but a lot of people don't have that built-in motivation and might just stop. Well, I had other criticisms too, didn't I? I'm trying to think right now. One of my other criticisms, I believe, was the part where if you fail a puzzle, sometimes it makes the previous puzzle undo itself, so you have to go back and resolve it. It kind of felt like busy work sometimes. It's not a big complaint, but it felt slightly annoying. I kind of wondered if it was just unnecessary on some level. I'm gonna go plant more trees, because I have all those sprouts. I kind of wonder if it was totally unnecessary to do that, just because... Like, a lot of people see that and they're like, oh, like their first reaction is that, and like a lot of people are just generally not happy when that happens for the first time. And I'm not entirely sure if it's necessary for the experience. I assume that the point is to avoid players spamming solutions until they get the right one. But really, it doesn't necessarily prevent them from doing that. Only the randomized puzzles from later in the game really can prevent that. The part where you force them to walk back and resolve the puzzle by literally just inputting the answer that's already in front of them because it's still solved in front of them, all it really does is create a little bit of busy work, and it kind of feels like a punishment that isn't... Because it's not a traditional game punishment, it kind of just feels annoying, and it's like a weird questionable design decision that seems like it doesn't have a reason to exist. Look at this little guy. He's immune to freaking... Why are you immune to light? I did not remember them being immune to light. They're kind of rare though, so I don't remember encountering them much in general, let alone above ground. But that's a super minor point. One of the bigger complaints, what was the one I had in mind? Oh yeah, the audio puzzles. The audio puzzles felt like kind of a mess to some extent. I wasn't psyched about how do I put it? Like, transcribing the pitches of audio onto a panel was compelling to me. I like that idea. Hear a little flute note, a little flute riff, and then try to translate that visually onto this little, like, the sort of language they're giving you to use to represent music was interesting in its own right. But when the game would then distract you by playing other sounds over that, sometimes I would hit a point where I'm like, I literally cannot tell. I would listen to it over and over again, and first of all, there was no button. I would have liked to have a button I could press to make the sound happen, because I would like to hear it on demand instead of being surprised by it, because they would play the sound. They would basically play the sound once every 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Like, it was a weirdly long delay between plays. So if you're just trying to hear it over and over again to pick out what you're trying to go for, the delay was kind of exasperating. But then at other times, just the fact that it was so irregular also meant that sometimes it would just kind of surprise you when it would finally play. But at some point, this is all going to be one color, or at least in a pattern that makes sense. I'll get to that at some point. Like it would have been nice to be able to play the sounds on demand, but in particular, the ambiguity of it was kind of frustrating because every other thing in all of the Witness, I think, was largely very consistent in exactly how it functioned. There was a lot of things where it's like, okay, this exact panel does this exact thing all the time forever, was basically how stuff worked in that game. But when you get to the audio stuff, it was kind of felt like rules were thrown out the window, and it was just like, there's a sound in here somewhere that represents, that's like somewhere in this cacophony of overlapping sounds, one of those is the right one, and we won't tell you which one. And what kind of was a bummer about it is that at first it seemed like there was a consistent rule, because in the very first part of the audio puzzles, at the very beginning of that, it is consistent, because in the first chunk of the puzzles, they give you one specific sound that is always the solution, and then they start overlapping it with other sounds, but the same sound is still always the right one. But in the later puzzles, they start making it so that the other sounds might be the right one, and that the one that used to be the sound that you were listening to is now potentially the distraction instead. And that was kind of exasperating because, yeah, you had no idea for sure what you were even trying to solve at times, so you would just be kind of listening to random parts of the sound and then figuring out which sound was the one that you think you're supposed to be transcribing, and then you try a few times, and you'd either think, I'm either getting it wrong, or maybe that's not the right sound in the first place, so maybe I'll try one of the other sounds, and it kind of felt like you were just kind of feeling around in the dark, which is kind of a bummer, because so much of the other game just felt so concrete in its rules and its mechanics that the moment that the game stopped being so concrete in such a way, it kind of felt like a betrayal of what was cool about the game so far. And so I would have liked to have less of that. And that was really brought to its its apex point, or whatever you want to call it, when you get to the red door on the ship. The infamous red door. At least I would later learn over time that was the infamous red door, is that apparently the internet at large was, or at least that's according to some rather inflammatory headlines on game sites, a lot of people were really stuck on that door on the ship because it had like 3 different puzzle mechanics overlapped with each other, and most of those puzzle mechanics were nice concrete things, because almost every other puzzle in the entire game is nice and concrete in its exact mechanics, but one of them was one of the things you had to do with that area was to transcribe a sound. And I solved it, and I am still not entirely 100% sure what I was transcribing, unfortunately, because it was just so vague. It's like there's a bunch of creaking, as far as I can tell, there was a bunch of creaking sounds on the ship, and one of those creaking sounds had a series of pitches that you were supposed to turn into a solution or something. And it was just so up in the air that, like, I don't think most people really were satisfied with themselves when they solved it, because they were like, I got it now, but I kind of feel like I didn't get it. So it was hard to tell. Like that's possibly the one puzzle in the entire game where I'm not actually satisfied with my solution for it even now, and that bums me out a bit. I'm not satisfied I don't have a freaking completed roof up here, but that's a different story. One day we will have roof. I really need to make more up there too. That's my mistake. So the other steps I should be taking here. But yeah, those are some of my minor complaints. So I said the audio puzzles, I said the lack of direction, or not super well handled desert area, I think. Was there something else? Oh yeah, the puzzle panel thing about how the puzzle panel was reset seemed a little iffy, but also that's like the most pointless complaint I have. Ultimately, I'm trying to go for something here, and I did shift to crouch and walked around, but I think that I'm pretty sure shift crouching doesn't work when you're on stairs, where like you still will fall to your death. Normally, when you shift crouch, you can't fall off ledges. That's more or less the point of it. But anyway, I'll just do this part from down here. I'm trying to make the roof stick out a little bit so it looks more natural, because right now it looks like someone cut my house in half. Anyway, I think that's it for Adrian VanRassel's question. And this is all in my way now. Let's see. The next one is pretty short, so I think I'll go ahead and do that one. Bonbonbuns says, what are your thoughts on virtual reality and the way it's headed? Also, are you ever going to order and play/record the HTC Vive? It's expensive, I know, but maybe you should set up something on your Patreon. I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I would donate for you to get the Vive. Probably not. I am largely completely uninterested in all of virtual reality. Like, I think it's a fun... Like, I'm sure it's a fun little experience to be like, oh, look, everything looks real, whoa, and like trip out for a few minutes, but I don't really look forward to playing video games in general on virtual reality machines. I don't think that seems compelling to me. And by and large, the games I played wouldn't benefit from virtual reality advances. Like, I guess when I'm playing something like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, my head motions being translated directly into the game to make it all feel a little bit more immediate might be kind of cool, but outside of that super specific context, which is a relatively minor part of games I play, like, is virtual reality really going to help me when I'm playing like Pillars of Eternity or Dragon Age Inquisition or The Witcher 3, where it's like I'm a third person character from far away, and like what I don't know what job immersion, I don't know what immersion bonus I'd really get from a headset, because even if it makes me feel like I'm actually there somehow, isn't that effect still ultimately like, hey, I'm actually here, floating 50 feet above everything? It's like, that's not I don't want to feel like I'm flying above the action. Frankly, I don't like heights, so that's not encouraging to me. But yeah, most of the games I play, the camera angle is not conducive to virtual reality in a way that I am particularly interested in experiencing. And yeah, also, it's super expensive, and I live on a super tight budget generally, because I've never had a successful career that makes good money, ever. So, it's a little hard to justify the expense of buying virtual reality stuff compared to a video game console, because the applications for my general stuff is a bit lower. It'd be kind of like... I just don't have a channel that plays that kind of content in general. I have a channel that plays RPGs and stuff like that, and it just seems a little out of whack with what I do, you know? There, light it up a little bit. It's kind of nice. Yay! So I probably won't. I don't know if I'll ever have. I don't know if I'll ever have a virtual reality device, but specifically, I don't know if I'll ever have an HTC Vive. That seems like a bit of an odd choice to me, because isn't that the virtual reality piece that's basically... I could be wrong, but I thought the HTC one was the one that's basically like you're essentially strapping your phone to your face, I thought, or something. I could be mixing things up, but usually people talk about Morpheus or whatever, I guess it's called PlayStation VR, or they talk about obviously the Oculus Rift. So I'm a little surprised by the HTC Vive shout out to begin with. I wonder if we're already at that point. Are we already going to have fanboys for one platform or the other? Because that's always the fun part, is when a bunch of organizations are competing with each other, and people feel the need to side with one over the other one, as if corporations give a shit about how you feel as a human being and stuff. Not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just looking forward to the inevitable part where people attach their entire human identities to brands that don't think or feel. But yeah, I am unlikely to be producing any virtual reality style content on this channel, and I am generally uncomfortable with the idea of trying to crowdfund the acquisition of that kind of stuff, like a Kickstarter. It'd be like that's essentially like having a Kickstarter for me having virtual reality. There seems like there's just better things for me to ask money for, but also just I'm already asking for money in general, so it seems like alright, I forgot about the lava situation. It seems like a bad idea to then redirect that goodwill towards, hey, you want to buy me video game hardware? And also seems largely unrealistic, considering that I haven't checked the number for the value for that specific device, but in general, virtual reality costs significantly more than how much I make from Patreon every month right now. So the chances of people suddenly coming out of the woodwork to fund that specific thing when it's not how much I'm getting already on Patreon seems largely unrealistic. And I don't know what I'd be promising them, because it'd be with the promise of making content that's completely unrelated to the content that they're subscribed for, because none of them are really subscribed for those reasons to begin with. So yeah, the whole thing seems largely unrealistic and a little pointless. And yeah, I think I've listed like 5 reasons why it's probably not going to happen. But hey, if oh, I'm starving now. That's a good sign. I do need to make a farm at some point. In the unlikely situation where some PR company reaches out to me and is like, hey, you want free virtual reality? I would totally take that free virtual reality and make videos on that free virtual reality, because why not make content for something that I get for free that I can potentially make money off of and check it out. And also, of course, I'm curious, but yeah, I won't be making the leap myself, I don't think. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching like always, and like always, you can ask questions in the comments below and I'll get around to them at some point. I'm adding them all to a text document and going through that bit by bit, which is why I'm still answering questions from the part 1 of the series. Yeah. See you guys next time.